order as of 10:17 a.m. Do we have any public testimony on our agenda items today?
Yes, Chair. The first testifier is Joan Tacom. I think that's what that says.
Okay, welcome, Joan. I would just like to remind everyone that they have a 4-minute limit on their testimony, and we'd really appreciate it if we stuck to this. We have a very, very packed agenda. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Joan Takamori. I'm the Public Health Nursing Branch Chief for the Department of Health. I'm representing Dr. Ginny Pressler for the DOH. So we're in strong support of the proposed revision of Board Policy 103.2 for health services. This proposed policy reflects an approach that emphasizes government agencies, community organizations, schools, and other community members to work together on a comprehensive approach. What we're actually doing right now is, as a baseline, there are school health aides in all 256 schools. We also have approximately 80 PHNs, public health nurses, from the Department of Health that also support health consultation, nursing consultation to support these health aides in the school setting. And they are assigned to 256 schools. This is part of the array of services that we do provide for the Department of Health. In addition to that, there are multiple other services that are available in the school setting, such as Barrington High School. They actually have a public health nurse specifically assigned for that school full-time. There are Hawaii Keiki nurses that are now in the school setting. This is from the UH School of Nursing program that's also supporting the different complexes, right now in 5 different complexes. And so there's such a different array, including even school-based health centers that are located at Kahuku High School and Waina and Nanakuli area. And so one of the things with this policy is that it really supports an array of services based on needs of communities. Each community, whether you're from Hana to Waimanalo to Nanakuli, it is going to be very different. So the key approach is really getting that community feedback on what are the needs of that community rather than a blanket approach. This policy, however, will give that guidance across all areas and allow the community to provide that feedback.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Ms. Joan? Board Member Amy.
Thanks, Joan, for coming to provide the testimony. Can you tell me how Farrington High School pays for having a regular full-time public health nurse at the school, and what does that nurse do?
So this position actually started, as far as I know, from Department of Labor. And when they pulled out, Barrington High School decided to continue this position. So the position that we have there has been there, the nurse has been there for 28 years. The position has been there for longer than that. And it actually started from the neighborhood boards. In addition to that, what this position entails is that we do a MOA on a regular basis to maintain that. So the funding comes directly from Barrington High School. What this nurse does is specifically work in the school setting, and what she also does is anywhere from working with someone with diabetes that is uncontrolled, works with the family, could be teen pregnancies, as far as supporting parents to be able to manage and support them in the community setting. It can also be an assistance to the school health aides as well as even the health academies. So this public health nurse has an array of services that really focuses not just on the individual student, but also incorporates the family as well as resources. What she also does is we also still have another public health nurse in the field that is assigned so that if there needs to be some outreach in the community, it is referred to that nurse. So they both work closely together.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Horner.
Joan, could you comment, because I know you're involved, on where Department of Health feels that the school health aide that's in the schools, as you and I both know, they were very much, I would say, undertrained, frankly underpaid, relative to the scope of responsibilities. Where's the Department of Health in regards to the plan to try to upgrade those positions to KCC and other places?
So for the last 2.5 years, we've been working closely with Kapiolani Community College, and they actually have a grant to look at consistent training for the health aides across the state. And one of the things that we're doing is collaboration with DOE as well as public health nursing and the Department of Health to look at that curriculum. And so we've offered our training to Kapiolani Community College to actually develop this curriculum. They have already started from the last year in training these health aides to have competency-based training and curriculum. And so one of the things is we are shooting for getting all health aides to be trained. For those that are, because we will need to also look at potentially grandfathering those that do not, we cannot require them at this point, and that is some discussion that we're doing along with DOE.
Right, but that was, I think the deal was cut with HGEA, that as long as we grandfather the existing folks, we can allow the people that volunteer. And I think 67 or 68 of our 256 health aides actually went through that training. There's level 1, 2, 3. But I guess what I'm after is, from a professional that's got community responsibilities within our various complexes, how do you envision from the department, Dr. Pressler's, because to me it's always a big philosophical question of where does the line get drawn between what the Department of Education does in health and what the Department of Health, right? I mean, there's an overlap, clearly. And so, and it's not a right or wrong answer, it's just someone needs to, and both sides are understaffed and underfunded, is the reality. So our line of defense, I remember when we did Act 51, you probably remember, before school nurses were in the schools under the Department of Health, it got changed. And we, this Department of Education, with the school health aides, and they were basic CPR training. So my point is, how far do we go with the school health aides position to try to upgrade that position? Maybe not today, but at some point I think there needs to be kind of a policy question with Department of Health and DOE as to where that line gets drawn. You hear what I'm saying? As to, I appreciate this policy, I'm supportive, but I don't know if it addresses that systemic question of where does Department of Health begin and where does Department of Education end?
So let me try and answer that question.
Thank you.
Multiple areas with this. One of the things is, yes, in 2007, up until then, Department of Health had the health aides as well as the public health nurses. Only the health aides moved over to DOE, public health nurses, because of the array of services that we do for the Department of Health, stayed within the Department of Health. However, since 2007, we have been still working with the MOU that defines our role in supporting the health aides and the schools. And so as far as the curriculum, when it was under public health nursing, we did have an extensive 2-week training that we did provide. And what we're trying to approach with training now, that it is, because it is under DOE, is that with this KCC curriculum, it is now a 75 credit course. That is very consistent training through their curriculum, as well as
If I
going
can
through.
interrupt, Lisa, I looked at that course, and it's quite rigorous. It's not an easy course. I mean, I'm proud of our folks that volunteered to take that rigorous curriculum.
Yes.
Volunteered to do it, which the department paid for, correct?
Yes.
Through the grant.
Yes. Well, the grant does support it, and for the health aides, these health aides actually have been volunteering their own time to go on their own hours, not during school hours, to attend these courses. So there is that need. So one is it does provide for a competency-based curriculum training for the health aides, for a level 1, which is basic where they're at, as well as a level 2, which is actually supporting a bit more of the services that they're able to do. In addition to, say, for instance, health education, more concepts in how they're relaying the messaging to the students as well as to staff. As far as moving this up, we definitely will support that with the health aides, we would like to see that there is consistent training across the board. But there will be some cost to it. One of what we're looking at is, say for instance, an example is nurses' aides in the hospital setting. That training is a certificate in order to obtain a job in a long-term care facility. However, with the school health aide certificate, it will be different. That was something that we would like to see as a requirement before you can go in to become a health aide or to apply for employment.
Okay, thank you very much for informing us. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Board Member Min has another question.
see if you can follow me on this. I know you folks provide services based on maybe the school's needs, and the schools can pay for them, etc. But have you ever done any data to look at where the school, the actual help can be the most effective in terms of a systemic problem? Let me give you an example. Middle school has a lot of problems. We had 2 social services in our school, which proved to be invaluable. So if we're going to use our help, can we possibly consider looking at areas where, you know, that's maybe one of the most needed areas, because as they're growing, as the hormones come in, sex, all these type of things. So instead of just having them get services based on what the school needs, would the department start to look at an overall target, like, you know what, this is where we have the most problems? I'm just throwing this out as something to look at.
One of the things that we've been looking at is trying to explore if there is a possibility of having a student health weighted formula. It's not just based on enrollment, but it would also be based not just on the number of medications, because what we also see with some of our data, the amount of medications in some of the schools that we would anticipate would be high are actually low. And through our health, as health professionals, when we analyze that, we are looking at, is it a possibility that there's no access to healthcare in those communities? So there's multiple factors, socioeconomic levels, yes. In elementary school, there's higher needs, but towards middle school and high school, one of the things that we also want to work towards is really self-management. So that when they graduate high school, it's not just with a high school diploma, but also the ability to manage their own health care, depending on their needs and their abilities.
Thank you.
Next testifier is Susan Rocco.
Hi, Ms. Rocco.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity, Chair Hamagao and Vice Chair Williams. I'm here representing Martha Guinan, the Chair of the Special Ed Advisory Council, and also Ivalee Sinclair, who is our Legislative Committee Chair. We have provided testimony on 3 policies being discussed today. We'd like to echo Joan's sentiment that the health policy is very progressive, and we especially appreciated the process for coming to that policy. It was very inclusive and very thorough. We would like to obviously support the special education and related service policy. From what we could tell, there is no proposed change to that policy. Does that sound right to you?
Which one are you talking about? There's
Special education and related services.
I don't believe there's any.
Looks as an as-is.
Right.
And
Except in the pig
there
item.
are some things about that policy. I'm sure Ms. Cox remembers passing that one in 2010, that some of the terminology is not commonly used today, like Centers for Excellence, but all in all, it's a good policy and we support it. And we offered the same recommendations for the inclusion policy as we did at our last meeting with you. And those 3 specifically are making sure that inclusion includes preschoolers, because our state, as many states in the nation, have limited opportunities for preschoolers to be educated with their non-disabled peers. And the U.S. Department of Education is really pushing for inclusive options. Secondly, we want to have a clear definition of inclusion, and I know that Assistant Superintendent Mulcahy talked about a definition for inclusive practices, but we like the inclusion definition offered by Thousand and Villa because it gets into the philosophy and the commitment and not just the words, the verbiage. And thirdly, we'd like to suggest that you expand some of the descriptions of what an inclusive school would look like. We find today that it's difficult because sometimes decisions are made on previous expectations or low expectations of kids and also on resources. So we need to get away from that. We need more time for teachers to plan and work together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rocco. Any questions or comments? Thank you for your very specific testimony and very specific ways of improving it.
Next testifier is Corey Rosenlee.
Welcome, Mr. Rosenlee.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Corey Rosenlee, President of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. I'm here to testify on the board policy of 102.12, reporting student progress and achievement. Actually, HSTA actually likes a lot of these changes. The whole idea of moving to a holistic approach in teaching to the whole child and moving away some ways from just the one test thing is something that we actually do support. There is one part of the policy that did set up made me nervous. And the current change is that student attendance and general learning outcome performance ratings will appear in student evaluations, but reported separately from academic grades. And student attendance and general learning outcomes for secondary schools will be reported separately. There are 7 GLOs. There are classes where teachers in the secondary level have 150 to 200 students. To put that in perspective, that's 1,400 data points. I have lived through this hell at Campbell High School when we had to report it. It was one of the most demoralizing things I did when I was at Campbell. And I wanted to explain why. We have all these students, and I had all these students that I had to do all 7 of these GLOs for, and we had to put in data for each one. But the problem is that each of the data points, if you want to take it seriously and have them meaningful, would have to have data and grades and results behind it. It shouldn't be just pushing in data as they're going along. It took a lot of time to do this, and I want you to imagine, even as a parent, if you got it and you saw 42 data points if you had 6 classes, it wouldn't mean very much to the parent. But it was taking a lot of work from the teachers. Whenever as a teacher, if you're sitting there putting in stuff that is just taking your time that you really don't feel is actually helping your the parent or the child, this is something that doesn't benefit anyone. And there are got to be ways that we have to consider the time the teachers have to do with this one. So you don't have this in the language that, for a testimony, but this is the recommendations that we are making. It reads like this. Student attendance and general learning outcome performance ratings will appear in student evaluations but reported separately from academic grades, and just add for elementary students. Because when you're dealing with 25 students and you have them all year long, it's a little easier to do the GLOs. The second sentence would read, student attendance, and cross out and general learning outcomes, just cross out the general learning outcomes for secondary schools were reported separately. So I don't want to make sure that, just that we don't ask our secondary teachers that have hundreds of students to also include that part in the reporting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Rosenlee? Sure, Ms. Cox.
When you're saying secondary, you're talking about middle and high,
Yes,
or only high?
middle and high, because middle school teachers also have lots of students. So if they're teaching 7th and 8th grade, they may have 6, 7 classes, 30, 35 students. That's a lot of grades.
I just attended a Mayday program at a middle school, and the way they selected the beginning part of the students in the court had to do with all students that were outstanding in all the GLOs. So there are schools that actually want to do that. So I think we need to be careful on how. I understand what you're saying because I was a high school teacher. So, but I just feel like when we're looking at a policy, maybe we need to think about it a little more, because there are schools, secondary schools, that want to use the GLOs, and some that are drowning because they have so many kids to try to do that. So I guess probably I'm supposedly asking a question of you, but I'm feeling I need more time to think about that. But I appreciate that what you brought up, but I also have to tell you that not all schools are going to agree with what you just said.
And I know that when we did it at Campbell, that, some teachers did it, some teachers did it willingly, and there's also a large group that protested by not doing it at all, because they just felt it was meaningless.
So how are you proposing something meaningful to then assess the whole child? I mean, part of putting in place achievement in a broad idea is then measuring it, evaluating it.
I think like when it comes to, we've had this conversation before, when we look at a grade, that a grade is not just a one test type of thing, but if you look at the previous thing that they're putting on this, the utilization of student portfolios and other measures of student progress. I think that when that grade is finalized, if you're using multiple means of assessment to look at that child to give up that grade, that is successful. And I think, to be honest with you, a lot of parents, that's what they look for. A lot of the jumble of the GLOs won't necessarily make sense. And if you have a line of stuff, it may not talk about necessarily what the student's doing, but that teacher. If you have, say, for example, 7 teachers, and they all rate the student very highly on a GLO, and one class is rated low, would they say it's the student, or would they say, why did that teacher give that poor grade for that one? And so it does create that concern.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I understand that you're listed for another
Yeah.
point, and so since you're up here, maybe go ahead and go for that next one, and we'll start your clock again.
The other one we wanted to testify primarily on is BOE policy 106.2 on class size. Class size is a very important issue. And in fact, it's research shown is one of the most important ways we can affect student achievement. I do want to share a couple of the studies that we have. The Institute of Education Sciences, the research arm of the U.S. Department of Education, concludes that class size reduction is one of only 4 evidence-based reforms that have been proven to increase student achievement. Experiments in Tennessee, Wisconsin, and other states have demonstrated that students in smaller classes scored better on standardized tests, received better grades, and exhibit improved attendance. Moreover, poor and minority students benefit the most from smaller class sizes, experiencing twice the achievement gains of the average student. A study commissioned by the U.S. Department of Education analyzed the achievement of students in 2,500 schools across the nation by their performance on the NAEP test. After controlling for student background, the only objective factor that correlated with higher test scores was class size. We currently, and I say we all have this problem, HSTA did a survey of its members, and we have a large segment of our secondary population that reports classes of 40 and 50 students. Total workload, we just talked about, of 150, 200 students on your entire workload. The problem is right now is how we measure class size. If you look at the SSIR report, it takes the entire amount of adults basically on campus, the teachers, and divide by students. But that includes registers, counselors, librarians, curriculum coordinators, academic coaches, and then divides it. We don't actually look at the actual class sizes that our students are facing. And then when you average in things such as medical fragile students or FSC classes, it gives the appearance that our class sizes are a lot lower than they actually are. And when comparing ourselves to other school districts, one of the big differences between Hawaii and other districts is they actually have a cap to make sure that we don't just keep on having this creep of, if we just take out this one teacher to be an academic coach, that's only going to raise the class size for everyone by 1 student. But every time we do this, and we keep on doing this, then all of a sudden we start having this creep of 5, 6 more students per classes. We already have a cap inside the BOE policy of 2237. And we do that for K through 2 of saying 25 is the maximum. I think we also need a cap when it comes to 4 through 12. And by the way, this is standard practice across the U.S. mainland when it comes to other school districts similar to Hawaii. They have a maximum classroom size. So all we ask, throw it out there, is instead of taking the word optimum, put maximum class size for 4 through 12 should be 26:1. We have some exceptions, band, orchestra, choir, and theater. Those classes also can be a little larger. We brought it up to our PE teachers about the maximum class size being larger for them, and it said, no, that maximum class size is important for PE teachers as well. We also ask that we have a report finding of how schools are doing this. Some schools are already doing this, but other schools are having a problem when it comes to this one. This is a large issue. I don't know if it's going to be solved immediately, but I think it's a conversation I think is very important that we have with the Board of Education of how can we ensure that every child gets this quality education and we have maximum class size. If we say the classroom size is important through K through 2, how about our other students? Don't they need that one-on-one attention as well? And I do think that at some point we need to not just have an optimum size, but a maximum class size that's put into policy as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Rosenly? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you all.
Next testifier is Mitzi Higa.
Mitzi.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm speaking for HSTA, Mitzi Higa, regarding the agenda item 5B, policy 105.12, regarding special education related services. HSTA supports this policy, but we have a specific amendment that we would like you to consider. We'd like you to provide teachers, the exact wording, provide teachers with adequate instructional resources, preparation time, and support staff to meet the individual needs of students. This is a similar provision that we see in proposed policy 105.13, inclusion. Okay, we need to think about our special ed teachers and what's happening in our schools, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about. They are overwhelmed, overloaded. Our emergency hires are getting placed in FSC classrooms that they are unprepared for. If we don't put a line that says we need to really have as a goal that we are providing these teachers with adequate instructional resources. We did have $1,690 per teacher with federal funds, but that ended in 2010-11. That was for classroom supplies. So now we did a survey of our special ed teachers to find out how much if they're spending their own money, and they are. So 63% of SPED teachers responded that they had not received special ed allocations from school administrators, and 80% stated that they had made out-of-pocket purchases to meet the specific needs of their students. As teachers, general ed, we do this as well, but I see special ed teachers doing it even more because their students require time. If they're working in small groups or individual, which these students need, that requires much more preparation time. It requires modification of lessons. Sometimes you have to modify the actual tools that they use so that you can actually meet their needs. We need to help them become independent citizens as they grow older, and they need extra supports to do that. And our teachers who are helping them need extra supports to accomplish this task. If they're getting larger class sizes, less resources, no time to plan, attending IEP meetings, teachers at my school sometimes attend them till 7 p.m. at night at the sacrifice of their family, but they do it, of course, because they do. But should they? Should they have to? Should they be? They should be compensated and supported. And we really hope you will consider this amendment to this policy. Otherwise, we do support it.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Mitzi? Thank you very much for your testimony.
There are no more testifiers, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kenyon. Let's move on to the approval of the minutes. In your meeting binders, the minutes of the April 5, 2016 Student Achievement Committee meeting. Please take a moment to review them. If there are no revisions, may I please get a motion and second to approve the minutes? Okay, let's vote. All in favor? Opposed? The minutes have been approved. Thank you. We are going to now move to our first discussion item, starting with an update on Board Policy 105.15, the Seal of Biliteracy Implementation Plan. I would like to call upon Sandy Goya, Director of OSIS, to present on this agenda item. Welcome, Sandy.
So
today it's my privilege to provide an update on the Seal of Biliteracy. The last time we provided an update on our implementation plan was in December by our Assistant Superintendent, Suzanne Mulcahy. And interestingly enough, at that time, in November 2015, the Census Bureau released its most recent findings, and it noted that more than 100 languages are spoken in Hawaii. They further reported that more than 320,000 people spoke a language other than English at home. The top 2 languages spoken other than English are Tagalog and Ilocano, followed by Japanese, Spanish, and Hawaiian. So it only would seem befitting that we start this morning off by saying good morning to you in Tagalog, which would be Magandang umaga ho.
That was good pronunciation. Magandang umaga.
The next slide is the Seal of Biliteracy and our purpose. And overall, the goal of the program is to establish an educational culture that values our wealth of diversity. To date, I'm happy to report that 17 states have adopted the Seal of Biliteracy, and within just the last 3 weeks, Florida and Maryland added their names to the list. Hawaii, with 2 states, Louisiana and Minnesota, adopting on the same day, is actually the 13th state. So we're very much in the forefront. So since our last update, starting in January, we really focused our efforts on gathering and feedback on our proposed English proficiency and language assessment criteria. And certainly the insights and feedback provided by the high school principals were very integral as we move forward. The discussions did span over a number of months though, so it did not all take place within a couple of weeks. There was some very hearty discussion. And over that time, we shared that information at the Secondary Principals Forum, the Deputy Principal Roundtable, and also at the leadership meetings. So in February, over 100 educators from the DOE, including complex area superintendents, high school principals, DOE, ELL specialists, and teachers, attended the second Roadmap Symposium on building a multilingual workforce for Hawaii. It was organized by the Hawaii Language Roadmap Initiative. And the title was The Seal of Biliteracy, an Introduction for Educators, Employers, and the Community. It was held at the beautiful East West Center on the UH campus. And we were treated to some wonderful presentations by Linda Ignatz, which was the 2014 ACCOL, which stands for the American Council on Teaching on the Foreign Languages, who was the National Language Teacher of the Year. And she successfully brought the Seal of Biliteracy to Illinois, which was enacted by their state legislature in 2013. Also, Michelle Aoki, who is the International Education Administrator for Seattle Public Schools, and they also enacted the Seal of Biliteracy in law in 2014. They were very gracious in sharing their experiences in their journey to the adoption of their Seal of Biliteracy, and they very much congratulated Hawaii for being at the forefront and moving very quickly. Some of them took up to 4 or 5 years to actually get to their implementation stage. So they are very willing to work with us as we go forward, and we can certainly learn from their lessons. Also, which is really interesting too, is that a workforce panel was presented, and on that panel there was Dean Okimoto, the chairman and president of Nalo Farms, also Neil Mason, the general manager of the Ohana Waikiki East Hotel, Outrigger Hotels and Resorts, and Peter Glick, who's the president of Management Search and Consulting Inc., an executive search and business consulting firm. And what they did is they really brought the important issues of the workforce to everyone's attention, coming from the agriculture perspective, tourism, and also the business sense. And they said they were very interested in learning more about the seal and the need for multilingual speakers in the workforce and the importance as we move forward in that realm into the future for Hawaii. I would like to also
give a shout out to Director Dina Yoshimi. She is very good, much the leader of the Hawaii Language Roadmap Initiative. Without her, the symposium would not have happened. She sends her greetings to all of you. She's actually teaching a course at UH right now, so she could not be here. And we look forward to collaborating with her on the third symposium next year, which she has agreed would also focus on the seal again. So we're very happy about that. So armed with that information and continuing our education in terms of assessments, we started and I'm going to say Sangatsu in Japanese, so if you know Ichi-ni-san, then you also know the first 3 months of the year, which is Ichigatsu, Nigatsu, and Sangatsu. So, in our research of the testing companies, one in particular really best seemed to meet our needs. They focused on reading, writing, listening, and speaking. The fees were affordable, and they're open to working with states to developing other online tests. So we were looking at a number of companies, but we were very lucky in March that they just happened to be here in Hawaii attending another conference, and they were willing to meet with us and provide more information. And so armed with that information and certainly remembering what board member Min had recommended to us, that we certainly don't forget to reach out to our student members. We shifted gears a little bit. We had planned to administer a voluntary survey to juniors and seniors, but we changed our mind. And instead, I was very happy to co-present with board member Brennan Lee to the Hawaii State Student Council. And with the chair's permission, I'm going to turn over the floor to Brennan to share some of the feedback that he solicited from his colleagues.
Thank you, Brennan. Please share.
So this report it's kind of similar to the one I gave last meeting during my student report, but I would just reiterate what was already said. So on April 2nd, the Hawaii State Student Council held its last meeting at OSES, and we had we were very grateful for Ms. Sandy to come down and kind of share with students on the seal of biliteracy and kind of like the ins and outs and their opinions. So what happened was after Ms. Sandy, me, and Allison, she was there, so we kind of brought her along and she kind of helped us with this. And after presenting to the students, we shared a Google Docs with them, which had a list of questions on them where they were able to input their opinions and concerns. So instead of just saying like, what price would you feel comfortable paying, you might get some outliers like, oh, nothing, I don't have no money or something, or $100. But so to kind of prevent that from happening, we kind of gave them a little context before each question, and from there they're able to kind of give a more, I think, proper response that kind of reflects something that's not like extreme or like, you know. So then some of these topics included the cost, payment, testing sites, dates or times, proctors, agency, and employment support. So I think Ms. Sandy will kind of go over that more detail.
And
Yep.
so Brennan was really great. He really helped to lead the discussion. One of the things that had come up is when the Seal of Biliteracy had first started, we were very much hopeful that students would be able to easily and affordably just sign up for the test. And what we found out is the companies are actually charging an additional charge for individual proctoring up to $50. So what we want to do is definitely look forward to options that would provide more group testing environments, and we're hopeful that we can then help solicit volunteer proctors and take away that burden from the schools, which is our goal. And the online assessments that we are now looking at, which would start in the 17-18 school year, would be Arabic, Chinese, English, French, German, Hebrew, Italian, Japanese, and Spanish. But we have additional opportunities to expand, and that's what we'll be doing next year. So, as we go, oh, and I almost forgot to say, so we actually took a hand poll. We had people raise their hands to say how many of the folks in the room spoke another language, and 75% of almost the 50 students there said they spoke another language.
Yep. So I think moving forward, I forgot to mention that. So I think the exact was like 73 point something, but I think, like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to but,
That's still pretty high.
yeah, that's extremely high.
Very
so
high.
moving forward this in the month of June, I think we're going to still kind of keep in contact, and the Hawaii State Student Council is always open for more feedback. If you need anything, just come to us. And we're going to kind of create the HSSC members are going to kind of be like the ambassadors of kind of like this seal, and then we can kind of collaborate and kind of move this forward.
So we were very pleased to hear that they wanted to take an active role, and we think their voice and their continued support of the seal will make a huge difference moving forward. So here we are at May. So we are finalizing the application forms and the guidelines. We are coordinating the launch that will begin at the beginning of next school year. We are forming the committee because what we'd like to do is when we come up with this reward and honoring of our students, we would like to have our own logo here that would represent Hawaii. And we are also going to be developing the Seal of Biliteracy field for the transcript. And many of you are aware of the ongoing project that has to do with Infinite Campus. And so we will be developing that to make sure that it's ready for the class of 2017. So, with the 16-17 school year, I already mentioned that we'll be launching that. We will be distributing the collateral materials. In terms of the assessments for that year, it will be focused on advanced placement and the IB test. And we will be looking at a grade point average of 3.0. And there was much discussion on that. Many of the states actually had chose 2.0, others 2.5. But after much discussion and really wanting this to be an honor, it ended up being at 3.0. And we have much agreement on that going forward. We will continue our research assessment offerings during this time. And we'll meet with language community representatives. We want to build our community and language contact list. And skip to the slide. And we heard the board very clearly saying that when we introduce a new initiative, one of the goals is to definitely keep that burden off of schools. So we did discuss this with the principals, and they like this, that OSIS will take on the screening of the applications and the verification. We will notify the high schools of their seal of biliteracy honorees and candidates, and we'll provide the presentation medals. A.S. Mulcahy has found that in our budget to do so, and going forward, and we will be also mailing the certificate to our honorees. And one of the reasons why I said candidates is because for some of the students who take the AP and IB in spring, they won't find out their scores until summer, so they will become candidates and then they will become honorees after that. And with this information, we will be continuing our work with the UH College of Language, Linguistics, and Literature. And early on, as the seal of biliteracy was being formalized, they had noted in the statement to the board that they will be working towards mechanisms in which ways the recipients could be granted college credit possibly, and also placement of classes. And they definitely want to be considered as a resource partner in the development of assessments going forward. So, interesting enough, in the month of May, we'll be here next time thinking about how we are celebrating the class of 2017. And I understand in Spanish, and I did not take Spanish, but it's celebración. So trying to get other languages here. But by recognizing the students who earn the seal of biliteracy, we will further support and strengthen our commitment to ensure that our students are college and career ready as they enter the world. I will build on our rich linguistic and cultural assets here in Hawaii. And further, we will ensure that our students are skilled in multiple languages and note very clearly that it's an important research skill in this diverse economy. So that is coming to the end of the presentation. So I want to just say mahalo for your time today in Hawaiian, hui hou, until we meet again.
Thank you for your integrating of the multilingual languages of our state in your presentation.
I'm going to ask my board members if they have any questions before I make any comments. Board member, Mr. Chen.
Thanks, Sandy. I just had a question on whether there was a rationale for not including the SAT subject matter tests in the various languages as part of the approved assessment for this.
I think that it's going to be part of our additional discussions. Early on, what we wanted to do is to ensure that we were able to identify assessments for the first year, knowing that we would have continued discussions on that. So we will certainly make sure that's a part of it.
Okay, the specific scenario I'm thinking about is on Maui, in some of the schools we don't offer Korean language, but we have a lot of Korean speakers. They take the SAT subject matter exam in Korean and do naturally very well. So I'm just thinking that seems like a logical means by which to assess certain categories of kids who maybe don't have access to AD instruction.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Board member Williams.
Yes, maybe I misunderstood, but the list of languages that you said would be available next year, I didn't hear Ilocano and Tagalog.
Correct.
So is there a in your introduction you said that the census data show that a large number of students speak those languages, so it seems like in the initial rollout we would want to be sure to include those languages.
Yeah, so for in 16 and 17, we will be providing, we'll be noting the AP and IB language exams, advanced placement.
For those languages?
For the languages of, and I can list them, so Spanish, Chinese, French, German, Italian,
Yeah.
Japanese,
I know,
Latin.
I heard that. That's
And so what we're doing is we're definitely working closely with other states. What we want to ensure is that the assessments that are provided meet all the 4 areas of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And just so you know, in some languages, those assessments are still being developed. And only most recently, I can tell you an example, like Vietnamese was developed by another school district. So we're in talks with them. But certainly, as we look forward to the 17-18 school year, we're going to actively be pursuing that and looking for tests that are available.
okay, but I'm looking for a specific answer. So I asked about 2 languages. You're telling me that there's no appropriate assessment available at this time for Ilocano and Tagalog? Is that your statement? There's no assessments available?
So what we decided was, and after much discussion, we want to make sure that we roll this out in a way that we're able to do it well in the first year, which is the AP and the IB, and then we will be expanding if
But
we
with
are
all
able to.
due respect, I heard you, but you're not answering the question. You're telling me what you decided and all of this, but I'm asking you a specific question. Are you saying that these assessments are not available? If they're available, then I can understand why you wouldn't use them. If they're not available, I'd like to know that. So are there assessments available or not?
So, okay, so to answer your question in terms of what we're aware of right now and what we'd be able to do, and what we've looked at, we haven't been able to locate one that would meet our needs. And so
That's
when
what I
you
was
say,
asking.
yeah, what I'm trying to say is that, and I should have answered this better, is that it might be that there is a school district, so while a state might be adopting the seal of biliteracy, they're not like us as a single school district, so there might be a
Never
school that
considered
didn't.
the Philippines? I mean, they speak English and these languages. Did you ever think that they might themselves have the assessment available?
So we will continue, and that is a good point, and we will definitely look at that. I think
It's
also
just
what
that,
we're
look,
trying.
Sandy, these are the top 2 languages, and we're gonna roll it out, and all the Filipino kids are not gonna be eligible for the first year. So that's why I'm asking. I'm not saying you did anything wrong or you defeated. I'm trying to get more information about whether that might be possible or not, and I guess just urge you to look a little harder. If you don't have the assessments, then you can't include them. I understand that. That's why I'm probing, because obviously, that's the two target groups that have the most population. Thank you.
Thank you, let's let Board Member Amy. I was just going to comment based on Jim's point, because I agree, these two large groups are ones that we should address. And in conversations with Sandy, we've discussed the rolling out phase of the ones that are the most obvious, and that they are working with the community to develop or to find ones that are reflective of our populations, particularly of Ilocano and Tagalog. And so I know that the department is working in that area because they're conscientious of that. Thank you. Board Member Asabay.
Thanks for the presentation. So the 3.0 is required in English, not in the language that they would test for the seal of biliteracy. Is that right?
So to be more specific, so an overall 3.0 for graduation, in addition to the 3.0 for the English language courses towards graduation.
Okay. So a student who just, speaks Korean at home or whatever would not be required to have a 3.0 in Korean at school to be able to take the biliteracy or to take the exams, right?
Correct, and as we reported last time, that seat time or in a course would not be counting towards the seal of biliteracy.
Not be necessary?
Not be necessary,
Okay.
correct.
And then, so the timing of the award is at graduation. It isn't necessarily something that a senior could include in their college application, correct?
They could say that they are a seal of biliteracy candidate,
Okay.
and then we would confirm that afterwards.
So the testing will be in the spring, maybe, or?
In the
Is that-
spring, yes. And what we can tell you now is that there are some juniors who take the AP test this year, so we will be actively seeking them out and letting them know if they meet the requirements.
Okay, so they could have it early then?
Yes.
Take it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horner, and then Mr. DeLima, and then Mr. Min.
I'm sorry, to Mr. Williams' comments regarding Ilocano, is it possible for us to at least tell those kids that we're committed to make it happen within the next 12 months? I mean, I can't imagine that we can't build the criteria. The
I want to say...
The university system teaches that language at the university.
Yes,
right?
and that's why we want to work very closely with them. Yes.
So it seems to me as we're talking about policy today, it seems to me that would be it's the wrong message. As smart as the DOE is, as smart as the universities, et cetera, I can't imagine that we can't get the tools in place. If we can't do it here, there's no place in the United States that can't get it done. So I, for one, feel that we should, when we roll it out, we should at least send a message that we are committed to make it happen by X date. Is that not something we could do?
That is definitely something that is our goal to do, and we will be doing that. That is why we're very happy to be working very closely with the university, and that we have found a company in our continued conversations that is very willing to actively create these assessments online.
What I'm looking for is just morale of our kids, is to tell them that the truth, that the tools weren't readily available, AP, I understand, and that we're committed to make it happen, and we're going to make it happen within some reasonable length of time. That would be, I'll leave that up to the chair.
Thank you. And I am hearing from board members the urgency and the stress on the importance of saying we're committed to these languages.
I think it's not, the urgency is one thing, but just that we didn't forget that community. That community, there's a reason why it's not there. It's just logistics. It's not because we chose not to do it, which some people might assume.
Right.
I'd rather say that it was a logistical problem and that we're committed to make it happen by a reasonable length of time.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that and making sure that that messaging goes out. I, for one, strongly support your comments. Board Member DeLima.
I appreciate everybody's efforts in this, but quite frankly, in 10 minutes, I went online on my little iPhone, and I found that the New Jersey Seal of Illiteracy utilizes a series of tests for numerous languages, including Tagalog. So, now the AP test is exactly as you indicated. There's specific languages provided by the AP test. But there are other testing groups that New Jersey recognizes for their seal of illiteracy. The OPIC test, which is about another bunch of languages, including Tagalog. The OPI test, which includes Tagalog and Vietnamese. There's other testing organizations, but they don't include Tagalog, but they include other languages. So, quite frankly, I think, you guys got to go back to the drawing board and analyze this a little bit better, because you talked about, what other states may have. New Jersey has it. They talk about the languages tested by various exams. So, quite frankly, I'm not satisfied with the response because now, Tagalog is not the language spoken by a lot of our students who come from the Philippines. Ilocano is the first language. But the reality is, though, Tagalog is the national language. And if you go to the university, they don't teach Ilocano, they teach Tagalog. So we need to really revisit this. Maybe there needs to be some effort in terms of the Ilocano language. But we know that testing is done in Tagalog, at least in the state of New Jersey, by a series of these other tests that are provided. So I would ask that you rethink what you folks are doing. And whoever is assigned to this, you can give me their name offline, because I think they need to accept some responsibility in the presentation today as well. Thank you.
So if I may just, we will definitely be looking at that, but just so you know that for the tests that we're looking at, we are looking for all areas of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. We are also looking at the affordability, but we will also offer those even if they are above. When we looked at the test amounts, they ranged anywhere from sometimes $25 to over $100. So what we're trying to do is to make sure it's also affordable for our students. And in many cases, the reason we're moving very carefully is
I don't want to cut you off, but the truth of the matter is, a minute ago, you were saying that you weren't aware of what states may be doing tests, will need to do a search of it and make a determination. Now you're suggesting that the tests are maybe prohibitively expensive. So look, instead of going down a road and making more representations about the matter, I've shown you that there is a list, there's a seal of illiteracy test administered in New Jersey by their seal of illiteracy program. You didn't represent that the Tagalog was being done by a state in New Jersey. So why don't we take a look? If you're saying you guys looked at New Jersey, you looked at the test, I know you didn't say that. So let me say, go back, take a look at it, see what's offered there, and then update the board, rather than kind of suggest that you did a comprehensive review and otherwise. So let's take a look at it. Maybe there's an ability to do that for our community that speaks Tagalog, and perhaps we can integrate it into Ilocano.
Thank you, Mr. Leo. Mr. Min.
I think you've heard enough from the board that, what direction we want to go. But I think it's, imperative that if New Jersey has Tagalog, that Hawaii should definitely have it. It's one of the biggest moving populations in our state. So the question becomes, in Tagalog, which is the national language, we wouldn't have a problem with the students coming in, even though they're from Ilocano, I understand that, but they should know Tagalog. Or are we trying to redefine our own exam to take care of our major population of Filipinos here, which is Ilocano? In other words, why can't you just give the test in Tagalog?
So I would like to interject here in the more education on the language of the Philippines. So the national language of the Philippines has a lot of Tagalog in it, but it's not only Tagalog. The national language is supposed to incorporate the multiple hundreds of different languages and dialects in the Philippines, but because it is in the seat of government is in Manila, which is Tagalog, which is what's spoken there. The majority of that language is thus so. But those that have immigrated mostly to Hawaii are from Ilocano backgrounds with Ilocano language, so that's the highest spoken language. So I understand the board's desire to have these majority languages represented, and I do